Hello, Patreon backers. I never know how to start these. So this is the Patreon or patrons Ask GN episode. That's a bonus. Thank you for posting your questions. Again, put them in the GN Discord if you want to submit something. So the first one is from TigerOne, who said he sent a whole list of questions. This one was, most titles like Battlefield don't have benchmarks in multiplayer because of the inability to reproduce results consistently. If we were to limit the variance on the network, say netcat'ing the packets on the interface or something, would there be any other obstacle to producing such a benchmark as a service? The trouble is less about the network in most, except for streaming, and more about games like Battlefield having a lot of inherent variance with multiplayer. So the best thing we've found, and Battlefield's not, there is no good solution, but the best thing we've found is games where you can create your own match, like Overwatch, because then you can pick the map, you can make sure it stays on that map, because that's the biggest influencer of performance. You can find a 24/7 server for Battlefield, but you pick the map, and then the next step is we determine, do bot matches have the same impact to frame rate as human multiplayer matches? Typically the answer is yes. And if that's the case, then we put some bots on, set them to medium difficulty, and our objective is to stay alive and stay near a whole bunch of bots and just run benchmarks like that. And then benchmark time is dictated by the standard deviation run to run, which we have a video out on already. So the answer is, network's not really the concern for the most part. It's just, think of Battlefield. 64 players is probably what you want to test. That's what people play. The map is gigantic. You really need to pick one area of the map to test. And if you're playing, I forget what the names of their game modes are. I used to play a lot of Battlefield, but playing the mode where the flags exchange ownership, then it's going to be really hard to keep getting back to the same place to benchmark. And you have to do that multiple times per device, per graphics setting. So if you're already taking 15, 20 minutes more time than normally to benchmark it on one device with one graphics setting, it's really not that feasible. And this is where some channels, like the non-serious reviewer, like casual uploads, can be useful, because they'll just upload some footage of them playing the game with an FPS counter and tell you what card it is, and that might be enough for you to figure out if it's doable. Whereas we're more focused on collecting good data between a lot of devices and creating a relative comparison, as opposed to necessarily an absolute comparison, which we typically do separately. So my approach to it is, I want to tell you relatively how much better is card A than card B in this game, and maybe the answer is 10%. My next objective is run some testing on one device, maybe two, AMD and NVIDIA, and look at the percent scaling between our version of the test, single player with bots, and multiplayer. And if it's linear between the two devices, then you can expect that the scalability, who's in the lead, will be linear over to multiplayer. What might not be the same is the exact FPS number, but the relative performance hopefully should be the same. At least that's our objective with testing. Next one's pretty fun. This is from ZDG. I don't know how you found this. ZDG posted just to the general chat and said, is this a Steve sighting? Ouch about the shoulder, and tagged Budokai or Mike Gaglione. So yeah, that was a Steve sighting, the picture he posted. Basically, that is, I think that comes from a clip that we can probably play where Mike, who has done some work with us in the past, and we go mountain biking, he he hit a kind of, I don't know, I think it's relatively small, I don't think he did, hit a small-ish drop on the bike, and you can kind of see it in his GoPro footage where he lands front wheel forward, and then he panics and pulls the front brake, and that flips the bike. So he actually ended up tumbling through that. It was like a really good tumble. And he popped up and he threw his hands up and said, "I'm good." And then right when his arms went up, I could hear like a pop from 30 feet away. And I think he separated his shoulder. It took a couple months to recover from. But that's not the only time he's crashed with me. He always gets it worse somehow. So yeah, that was a sighting from like 2015, I think. Let's see, next one. I just liked this name, GPU MSRP in quotes. What were the best Steve memes from 2017? I think the answer is probably cases in general. I don't know if we still have the clip somewhere, but we had a clip of like 15 seconds of just being upset with cases over the last year. It's average.
Not worth buying.
Why? So that's probably a good one if we still have that to play. The H500P drop was definitely pretty iconic. That's a classic one. I mean, that was iconic enough that the new version of the H500P has changes to the things that caused it to fall apart in that opening shot of our video, which I received a broken heart emoji over from Cooler Master PR when we published it. So I would say that's probably the best one for 2017. I don't know what the others were. Let me know if you have ideas. Red Mage Cecil, Buildzoid specifically, with these new AMD APUs out and the iGPU being, from the looks of it, overclocking friendly, and considering people will be putting these things into budget B350 boards, what could we be looking at in terms of stress or temps on these un-heatsinked 4+2 VRMs to push the GPUs? Well, I can tell you on the Gigabyte Gaming K5, which does have a heatsink, albeit not a great one, that one's getting pretty damn hot with a 1.18 SoC voltage, and on that board, there's not a picture of it on here really that's visible, but on that board, the top VRM, basically, you know, pretend it's this one. This heatsink is what corresponds to the iGPU voltage. It gets pretty damn hot. I have to put active air cooling on it, like a high RPM fan just straight above it. And with that setup, with a fan like right here, I think it was hitting 65 Celsius under like a brief 3D Mark load. So it does definitely get warm. And also, if you're talking like no heat sinks, like this board under here, this board, I think, sadly, is one of the best ones in terms of support for the APUs, in that it won't BSOD as much. But this VRM is like, the heatsink's non-existent, literally. So you're going to have problems. And there is no solution to that other than making a heatsink or putting a lot of airflow on it. And I do think it will be a problem if you're actually pushing to 1650 megahertz or something like that. I don't think you're going to be able to get away with a case with that board in it and no airflow. Next question. Notwist said, with GPU Boost 3.0, overclocking and winning the GPU lottery seems to be less variable between cards, but is there some good method to determine whether somebody lost? How would someone determine whether their card is clearly in the sub-par performance bracket, or are there margins between good and bad cards so narrow in real-world usage that this whole winning-losing concept is only for users chasing high 3D Mark scores? There's some truth to that. You can tell if you won or lost. It's all temperature driven, so I guess it's really a question of not necessarily what clocks can you hit, but what clocks can you hit at what temperatures. The only real way to know if yours is better or worse than someone else's is to check what their results were. So fortunately, that's pretty easy because it's just a GPU, so you don't have to worry about the rest of the system components. But same software, same GPU, you should be able to check versus reviewers, find the software they used, and run the same test, see what you get. When we do our like absolute max capabilities testing, we set the fan to 100% and run the thing as cool as is reasonable to determine whether it's a good overclocker or not. And that will basically come down to what frequency does it hit at its lowest temperature that we can reasonably achieve under ambient conditions. I don't know if that really answers your question, but there's not a great, I mean, it's not like CPUs where there's a very clear and easy, I can hit 5.0 but only at 1.42 volts. That's pretty obvious. With GPUs, they're so driven based on all the other factors and boost that it's kind of hard to tell. Next one, NULLOBANDITO says, do you think the release of the new GTX 20 series cards will have any impact on miners, or rather is there a chance that the prices are low enough at launch that people will actually be able to buy new graphics cards? I think production on some of the Pascal cards is finished at this point. I'm not sure. That's one of the headlines for rumor I saw. But if that's the case, it's not going to help Pascal prices. I don't think, if this has an impact on miners, I think it will be one where they buy all of the cards and use them to mine. So it's not the kind of impact you want. I don't know though, maybe they're just going to be really bad at it, but I can't think of a, it just so happens that a good gaming architecture tends to do pretty decent at mining too. So I don't know. I think more likely what's going to happen is you might see some clearing of stock from the miners, and then that would be a good time to grab a 10 series card used for a lower price, and hopefully it hasn't been too abused. I really don't know, though. I don't think it's going to help a lot, but I'm not sure. Depends how much they've made in terms of actual product. This one, I didn't write down your name. This one said, from my understanding, 6th, 7th, 8th gen Intel CPUs have 16 PCIe 3.0 lanes, then a DMI 3.0 interface to the chipset, roughly equal to 4 PCIe 3.0, when Ryzen CPUs are 24 lanes, PCIe 3.0, 16 shared between 2 slots, 4 for the chipset. Are there any cases on the Intel platform where you can saturate the DMI interface and cause a performance drop that wouldn't be seen on Ryzen due to the more dedicated storage lanes? First of all, on the actual lane assignment and distribution, we have some content pieces on that. I've talked about it a lot in AskGN before. I think at this point you can probably just search the channel for PCIe lanes and find stuff for the general information. For the really specific question, I'll just stick to that for now. Can you saturate the DMI to cause a performance drop? So this is not something I specialize in, but I know that Alan Malavantano from PC-Per has tested this, and I know for a fact that Der Bauer has tested this with Threadripper. And it comes down to, are you doing something like RAID, NVMe, M.2 SSDs? If you are, I think that the answer might be yes, you can actually cause a performance drop. I think under realistic use cases with like a single device, I'm not sure that you're going to see a meaningful, if measurable, performance drop. But I think once you start going to RAID and stuff, you'll notice it from, well, you can measure it. I don't know that you'll notice. You probably, between Threadripper and everything else, you would probably notice. But Ryzen and Intel, I'm not sure. Tweet at Alan Malvantano on Twitter and see what he says. But Der Bauer for sure did a test on that. You should check that out. That's it for this one. Leave questions in the AskGN Discord channel. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting us. And I'll see you next time.